Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge or, in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people,
which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you, and we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara Riska, life coach, wife, and the mother of 4 incredible and unique kids. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I completely lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and grace that once felt so completely lacking. I started the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves up against what feels impossible. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle the dreams that you hold impossible now. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you're a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Welcome back for part 2 of the conversation with Ashley Barlow. And if you missed last week's episode, you're probably going to want to step back and go listen to that episode first. However, you can break the rules. You can just listen to this one. And you're going to want to know that Ashley Barlow is an IEP attorney and a mom of 2 boys, and just so much fun to talk to. You're going to get to experience something a little different in this episode. We talk more deeply about the IEP experience, and she offers so much value and insight. And then we turn the tables. Ashley starts to ask me several questions about my experience, my story, coaching, and we kind of get into a little bit of tools, and I share a few things that are really valuable as far as taking on some of the work that we talk about as part of this conversation. So grab another cup of coffee and dive right in. I know you're going to enjoy. Here we go. You asked about our IEP experience, and I would say it has been really good. We have, well, and actually, I do want to ask about kind of this time, because this time is uncharted territories, I think, for all of us that have children with IEPs as we're doing distance learning. But in general, I feel like I've always felt like the teams that we've worked with have had his best interest in mind. And anytime we're making decisions, I never get the feeling that they're trying to do like the least acceptable amount. I always feel that they have his best interest in mind, which is, I think allows me to like lean back and let them be the professional, me be the mom. And so I'm really thankful for that. I will say though that and this is a question I want to ask you. I'm not an easily intimidated person in the sense that like from a professional standpoint, I can go into a room and a boardroom of all men and I feel pretty comfortable, right? We all have our insecurities, but I find that those IEP meetings are intimidating, right? And so our team usually consists of 9 or 10 people, and I know for myself that when I've been alone as the sole parent, my husband can't always make the meetings. That I'm kind of like very overwhelmed at all the information coming in. But it's not just that, it's actually the emotional experience of being a mom in that room with an IE, like working on the conversations that the IEP is talking about. Like it's like there's a lot there. And I remember there was one meeting in particular that they had asked counseling services to join the meeting. And so there's this new person in the meeting. I didn't know who they were. And then they introduced, oh yeah, we brought in the counselor. We believe that this person, that we should bring a counseling component onto the IEP. And while I wholeheartedly agree, I think I was just a little caught off guard. And it's one of those things where like, if you as a mom come up with an idea, oh, my son needs help and needs more therapy, it's great. But then when someone else tells you that your child needs more therapy, it took a little bit to like take the sting out of that, and like not feel like, oh my gosh, like there's just like was a knee-jerk reaction that I experienced. So I guess the question I want to ask you is, okay, one thing I have done is recognize I don't want to go to these meetings alone. Like I kind of just want someone to hold my hand. Like, yeah, in a very like, I want a buddy. Like I want someone to be in my emotional stronghold. So I've asked a dear friend of mine to say, hey, like, will you just come to this meeting with me, sit here, be a presence, be somebody that I know knows Levi, loves Levi, and then can just be my extra ears, can be like my coach, and not an advocate. I didn't feel at that time that I needed an advocate. Anyhow, so that for me was like, I was able to recognize my need. So my question is for you as a mom, and I know you're navigating this both as mom and professional, what do you do for yourself to support yourself at the IEP meetings? And then what would you recommend to any of your clients?
So that's a great question. What I do myself is I really try to keep it objective. So I get a draft of the IEP that the school is suggesting before the meeting. I've got such a great relationship with my team that they actually ask me if I have any ideas before they even draft the draft. So I kind of weigh in, then they do the stuff because they're the professionals. And I look at it, and I not only look at it for what they've drafted, and I'll write, I just handwrite revisions on it. But then I also think outside of it and think, okay, now what else do I want to add to this? Is there like a goal or a supplementary aid or service that I think he needs? Or do I want to add another related service professional, like a counselor? That's a good example. So I look at their draft, but then I also think, okay, now I get to think independently because I'm the parent and I'm a team member, and I get to think about anything that I would add to this. And then I actually communicate that before the meeting. So I scan my handwritten copy and I email it to them and say, thank you so much for your thoughts. Here are my thoughts. And so then when we get to the meeting, we are already in the discussion. We've already started the discussion, and it feels more like a business meeting. It doesn't feel like IEP meetings don't feel like any kind of meeting you've ever been to. And so if you start with the document that you're going to be reviewing and you have a chance to review it and really kind of not only look at it because it's a foreign language and it's a new
I don't there's not much I hate more than a long packet of black and white small letters that you don't understand most of it.
Yeah. So it gives you the time to look at that. But then in addition to that, it allows you to like kind of have the emotional mom part too, like read the part that says that they've just stared at their hands for 5 minutes. And you're like, wait, my child doesn't just stare at their hands.
Yeah. Giving yourself some space. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So that's how I do it. Now, I've got a great relationship with my team. If I ever needed it, I would absolutely bring an advocate or an attorney. I had a meeting that I thought they might give me some pushback on, and I had 9 attorneys on hold.
Like on hold, like on standby, like you could call them at any point.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's called a deep bench. Remember earlier I talked about that? Ladies, that's the example. You know?
I had 9 attorneys from 9 different states that are friends that were all ready to bump in. It was kind of silly, but I was going to meet silly with silly and say, okay, well, cool. Then I do have an attorney and they're right here. And then be like, beep, and patch them all in.
I love how you're like, I had that all figured out.
There was like a plan A, plan B, and plan C. So sometimes, and it's funny because I would never recommend that a client act that petty, but I was ready to be that petty myself. I think, and that's a good lesson to learn, because I read everything that I am going to send out to my husband first, A, because he's signing it also, but B, because it's really hard to advocate for yourself. So, and that's why I say I would absolutely have a third party that's not tied to the emotional piece of it if I needed it. What I recommend to clients, I want to talk to your question about, or your observation, your feeling about that intimidation and that overwhelm. I think the best way to combat that is to empower yourself with information, because it feels so different. It's not like a business meeting. It's not like a social meeting. It's not like a medical meeting. They are super duper unique to school. And so really, you have to have a foundation of the law in order to know what's happening. And if you don't understand where you are in the IEP document, that thing follows itself. So you go from present levels, you take the needs, I like to say strengths and stretches instead of like good and bad, but you take those stretches, the needs, and you develop a goal for those. And so the present levels goes to the goals. And then you look at the goals, and from the goals, you get the meat of the IEP, that specially designed instruction that says what you're going to get, how they're going to teach it. And then that specially designed instruction, from that, you look and say, okay, well, what do I need in order to provide this specially designed instruction, the SDI? So then you look at the supplementary aids and services. And so like if I need, a multisensory research-based reading program, then maybe the teacher needs training. So maybe we add teacher training in. So we've identified a need of dyslexia and fluency, and then we've developed some reading goals for fluency and reading comprehension and those sorts of things. And then we've talked about how we're going to teach that, and then we get the tools to the teacher in order for the teacher to do it. So a lot of it is looking at the document forwards and backwards, right? And if you don't have a foundation of the law, you can't frame your arguments objectively. And that's when you feel so unempowered.
Well, I think you brought, so information is what I hear. And I think it actually goes back to what I was talking about with asking for help, right? It's like, if you don't know what to ask for, you can't ask for it, right? And that's where I'm like, oh, this is interesting, because I would have probably never thought of asking for teacher training as to be part of the IEP. And I think it just is a great example of like, you don't know what you don't know. Right. And so if somebody's not necessarily ready to engage with an attorney, like an expert like yourself, how can they inform themselves? Like, how can we go and like have the menu of what's available to us as parents with children with needs?
Funny you should ask, Kara.
Oh, look at us. Man, if only that was intentional. It would have been so good.
Well, Kara.
Do tell.
Sounds like an infomercial. So that's what Ashley Barlow Company is setting out to do, is to provide that affordable information in a really sequential, easy to follow manner. So I'll tell you where it was born. When my child was going to kindergarten, he had been in the preschool in our district. Now, it's important to this story to know that my mom taught in our district and retired from the school that's at the top of our street. Our school is 0.2 miles from our house. We walk there every day. My older son was already going there. My dad had been very involved in setting up the education foundation that has built 5 new schools in our district since I graduated. Like in the last 20 or 30, 20 years, we've built all 5 new school buildings. My brother and I both went to our school system, and my husband and his brother went through our school system. So, we live in our very small hometown, and we went to this meeting with all of our friends, people that had bought me wedding presents and bought presents when Jack was born. And they said, oh no, we can't educate him here at this school at the top of your street. He needs to go to this self-contained unit across town with other kids that are like him. And we've got a teacher that is like him.
Wow.
Right. And I had helped people with special education before, because I was a teacher and I had a child with Down syndrome. And, even before I had him, people had asked me questions and I had helped. Interestingly, I'd never charged because, long story short, but administrative cases like Department of Education kind of work are really nuanced. And so I would just kind of look something up, call somebody and say, hey, why don't you try this and call me back? Hey, why don't you try this and call me back? And never really charged, always did it as a favor for people. So we had a 3-hour meeting, and talk about overwhelming. They had tables lining the walls of the music room. The district brought 17 people to the meeting. My husband and I were there alone. Now, actually, I take that back. We did have somebody from our local Down Syndrome Association with us, but she was so overwhelmed also that she basically said nothing. And at the end of the meeting, they voted.
Voted?
They voted. And I said, almost sarcastically, we had actually anticipated this. And so we presented a PowerPoint presentation on inclusion that I would now give a C-.
But it did get done. So,
but yeah, it was done. And I wore a suit and heels, trying to take some of that power back. And
wait, so were you an attorney at this time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was an attorney. And I had been a teacher. And so, I had the tools, but I didn't have the specific special education tools, the stuff to tell me what inclusion was and why they had to do what I was asking them to do. I thought I had it, but I really didn't have it. And I felt so unempowered. So we present this PowerPoint presentation, 21 slides, I remember. I've got on my suit with a soft pink scarf to soften it up a smidge. And,
I love the intention behind all this. This is so good.
Oh, yeah. I've played all the games. And after a 3.5-hour meeting, Friday afternoon at 5:00, the special education director shrugged her shoulders and she said, well, I guess you got to sue us.
Really?
Yes. She said, I guess you got to file due process. And I said, well, okay. So we went home. I cried the whole way. I snotted all over that room, first of all, because I just started crying. I was like, and I had to wait for the papers to come back and everything. And I kept saying to my husband, I just don't feel mad very often. And this feels so terrible. And I mean, it was awful. And what I did was I went straight to my bedroom with my laptop and I started researching. And I literally came out to eat. But I spent the entire week drafting this 3-page letter to the superintendent, who has like no power, on a special.
You were doing what you could, though. You were doing what you could.
I didn't know what to do, and that's what it comes down to. And I kept thinking, there has to be a place where this information exists, and there isn't. So the real exciting part about this new company that I founded, Ashley Barlow Company, is that I'm offering 10-week trainings, video trainings that you can just download from my website that walk you through special education training start to finish. So they're just little modules, and we'll start with eligibility and evaluations. and we'll walk all the way through. And that's got all the information, not only that legal foundation work that's so important to the objective argument that helps you back up your argument, but then also the skills, the advocacy skills to get what you need. So.
Yeah. And actually well, first off, that sounds amazing. I'm so sorry you had to go through that experience. But I'm so thankful that you've turned it into something that you figured out how to help yourself, and that you have stepped up to the plate to help all those other families. So thank you for that. That's amazing.
Well, thank you. It's been a passion project for a really long time. And it happened during a pandemic. Who knew?
Who knew that now would be the time? One of my dear friends wrote a book like 7 years ago, and it was set to be published right, I think in March, and it happens to be called Stay, and it's really all about staying where God has you, and not kind of trying to run away from that. And so, who could have thought, in all the timing of all the world, of the perfection of that release, of that timing of that book to be published at that time.
Yeah.
So I do believe that there is divine orchestration in all this.
I do too. I got to tell you something else about Stay.
Let's hear it.
So, I have 2 spiritual leaders, and they were both born on December 25th. God and Jimmy Buffett.
Jimmy Buffett. That came out of like, whoa.
And Jimmy Buffett has a song called I Love the Now, and that's it. It's like, live in the moment, stay, right?
That is brilliant.
It is divine in and of itself. So yes, that's my dad's favorite song. I love the now. Like, all right, here we are. We're taking care of business right now. What can we do? I love it.
I love that so much. Okay, so maybe this is in the training. It probably is. And I feel like, wow, as you're talking, I was like, I think I need to sign up for that. I didn't think I did. I was like, I've got this covered. We got a good team. But I do find myself in this COVID situation in, I guess, a place where I'm kind of wondering if I might be leaning away from conflict. Because I'm not sure. So I guess here's where I'm at. So we're in California. We are still 100% distance learning at my child's school. He goes to a charter school. And so he's 100% home distance. In his normal IEP, he has a lot of services, one of which is an aide, a one-on-one aide, 3.5 hours a day. So, and I share that just to say, like, they don't just toss out aids, right? You actually have to show some significant need, that you need to have that level of support in order to access education.
Right.
And so his aid was established, I think, over a year ago. Anyhow, clearly aides don't come to our house during COVID. And so he's in junior high now. So he's in 6th grade. And essentially, well, okay, here's where I'm stuck at. I'm stuck as a mom thinking, I'm watching this district do the very best they can and work their tails off and not ever have met this before. Right. So I think there's this part of me that says, how can I ask them for more? Yeah. But yeah, then there's this other part as a mom where I'm like, my son still doesn't have what he needs.
Right.
And so I feel a little like stuck in this like human compassion place, and advocating for my mom or for my son as a mom place.
Yeah.
So talk to me.
That's really beautiful. It's also the number one question that I'm asked. But you asked it really beautifully, and you described the way that I feel about it. I see my son struggling day to day without that additional adult support. And I also see the sacrifice that I'm making personally in order to help him make the progress that he's making. So I want to answer it twofold. The first answer that I'll tell you is that the federal government has made it clear in guidance that has been issued during the COVID-19 pandemic that IEPs are to be carried out the way that they're written. So if your child has an aid, then that aid should be given to your child during the pandemic, however that looks. But the guidance also says that IEPs should be interpreted with flexibility. Now, flexibility is not a word that's oftentimes used in the law. A word that's used more often in the law is reasonable, and reasonable is spattered all throughout every area of law, contracts and criminal law and civil law, et cetera. So the way I describe reasonable is I like to talk about the shadow of the law. So things are not black and white ever in the law. If they were, there wouldn't be attorneys. We wouldn't have jobs. I like to talk about parameters, right? So like imagine an umbrella that casts a shadow, and the shadow has edges. And so within those edges is where a judge would probably rule, because we always have to kind of think about, okay, what would a judge do in this situation? And so whether it's a child support calculation, or it's whether or not how many hours we get an aid, or even whether or not we get an aid, a judge is going to look at that and say, okay, where are we between A and B, or A and Z even, in this kind of parameter? And so the federal government and the guidance for COVID has said flexibility, I think, is the same as what's reasonable. And the answer to that is unique to Levi. It's unique to everybody's child. And so what I've been encouraging parents to do is to really kind of keep good data at home. And that data can look different than the data at school, right? So you can take little video snippets and put them in a Dropbox. You can just keep a log of things that he says or things that he does when he's trying to learn distantly. You can keep a log of how he was doing before you supported him, and then how he was doing after you supported him. And if you go in with some objectivity and you say, okay, so here is some data, here's some stuff that you can observe, here's a little video snippet that you can watch, 30 seconds long, don't give them more than 6 minutes of video to watch. But here's what is happening at our house. Can we think together creatively about how we can access something with flexibility that's close to what he's supposed to get in his IEP? So what that might look like is an aid for less time. It might look like an aid electronically, just somebody checking in, on his Zoom if he is able to do Zooms. It might look like some people are having aides come to their homes. Insurance policies oftentimes prohibit that with just reason. But, we can think creatively about different ways to get that adult support. In addition to that, and I don't know what California's governor has done, but some governors have allowed small group instruction to be in person. And so that's what I asked for in my district personally. Was they actually asked me, it didn't work well in the spring, learning electronically from my child. But then this year they said, well, can we try it again? I said, yeah, sure. I'll try it, whatever. And I went to him after 2 weeks and I said, this is just not working. My kids don't learn well on screens. And so, we worked it out that he can go in person for a very short amount of time. And they're actually taking really great precautions in addition to what the district is doing, because my child is so vulnerable. So, that's kind of the two-part answer, right? Like, you're entitled to what it says, but with this flexibility piece, you've got to be flexible. But I also want to quickly talk about your kind of balance that you're trying to strike, and being compassionate to the teachers, but also being, asking for more for your child. So as parents of children with disabilities, or medical needs, I like to call it my bullshit radar. And I know that's a bad word, but we just cut to the chase, right? Like, we can make a decision and we can stick with that decision and we can go. And so what we all have to do right now is we have to just tap into that and say, okay, like, how do I feel? What do I want to do? And then stick with it. Know that that's the right decision, because that's the decision that you made. And so, like, don't fret about it. Make a decision, either ask for that help or say, no, I got it, we can do it, and then move forward.
That's really helpful. That's really, really helpful.
Can you tell us about Levi's journey?
I would be glad to. Levi, at the age of 2 and 3 months, was diagnosed with brain tumor. So in his case, his tumor was the only treatment option was surgery. Chemo wasn't an option, and radiation was only a very bad option if surgery wasn't successful. So he had a craniotomy, pretty invasive. So his tumor is basically, if you are in the very center of your head, from top to bottom and front to back. That's where his tumor did. And his tumor was quite large. So imagine the size of an egg in a 2-year-old's head. So his tumor was quite large. And thankfully, he had a fully successful resection. And from a tumor standpoint, the tumor resection, unfortunately, created a lot of residual challenges. So for him, he lost vision in one eye. So he's blind in one eye. Then he has limited field of vision likely in the other eye, although because of some of his impulse challenges, even though he's 11, we still haven't been able to totally dial that in because it requires a child to be pretty able to resist impulses. Right. And he also has hemiplegia. So that's going to be where half of his left side is less able than his right. And he's able to walk and to run. But if you were to watch him physically, you'd notice that he has a little different gait than other people. He also has a condition called panhypopituitarism, which means he doesn't have a pituitary. And so that comes with a handful of medication management that we have to do. So he has a condition called adrenal insufficiency, which essentially means that he's on manual operation when it comes to his stress hormone. So that's the one really that can lead to some, and has led to some, critical hospitalizations when he gets sick. What else do we have going on? So I think I mentioned the impulse challenges. He has some social and behavioral challenges. And I'd say it's interesting, as he was a 2-year-old, when I was helping him, or when we were helping him learn to walk again and figure out how to manage his new medical conditions, and kind of actually learn that we didn't learn till a year later that he was fully blind in his right eye. And now that he's, becoming larger in stature and, outweighs me by 20 pounds and doesn't really like sometimes when you tell him no. Right. That's the challenge that we're at now. And that's what we're trying to navigate as parents. And that's a little bit about his story.
Yeah. Wow. So he's healthy now. He's got the developmental or the residual physical, and I guess we could call them developmental challenges also, right? Because
I think it would fall under that category. Yeah. So he gets, support through school from a lot of different categories, but yes, healthy now. So we still do scans every year. His tumor type, I guess, can be pretty aggressive in popping back up. It's not aggressive in spreading through his body, so we never have to worry about it spreading. However, having cells pop up, unfortunately, can happen this many years out. So we still scan every year. We just got another clean scan in, I guess that would have been August. And so we're always so thankful for that.
Yes. What kind of tumor was it?
So his tumor type is called a craniopharyngioma.
Okay.
Don't ask me to spell it. I still can't. After so many years, I'm like, I still can't figure out the H's and the Y's. And I don't know. I have to look it up.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So my husband had a tumor on his spinal cord that oftentimes will occur in children in their brains. It was called an ependymoma, so different. So I know that you are a coach, and I'm curious as to, well, first of all, can you tell me kind of what that business is, what your coaching business looks like?
Yeah, so I'm a life coach, and it's funny, when I remember the first time I heard of a life coach, it was years prior to me deciding to be a life coach, and I remember thinking, so that's a thing, huh? That sounds cool. But I was like, it also kind of sounded like, oh, really? Okay. Anyhow, so yeah, I'm a life coach. And I remember when Levi was still in the hospital, I was crossing the street from the hospital over to the Ronald McDonald House. And I remember having this really clear moment where I didn't know the details, but I knew that I was going to use this experience that I've had to help people. And for me, it just allowed me to tap into something deeper. And because there was obviously a lot of hurt going on. And so for me, I didn't know what that was, but I actually just let that stay there and let's maybe hibernate for a couple years. Because I mean, I had a lot of recovery, still did you. I mean, we had years where it was just surviving. And I love podcasts. Here we are on a podcast, but I love podcasts and I listen to a lot of podcasts. And I was listening to a podcast of two people that I really admire. And I learned that one of them started as a life coach. So I heard this thing like life coach. I was like, huh, that's interesting. It just piqued my interest. And so that led me to researching to try to find the best school and the best education. Because I'm like, if I'm going to be this hokey thing called a life coach, I'm at least going to be a really good one.
Right.
And so I did a year-long intensive program, and I'm going to say it's probably in the like top best things I've ever done in my life. I feel like even if I look back at that year, I feel like who I was before and who I am now, probably a little unrecognizable. And I mean, like, if you didn't know me well, then probably you wouldn't see the huge differences. But I know what I experienced as who I am now, as opposed to before, was, transformational. And so that started my journey. That was about 5 years ago now, almost. When I first became a coach, I think I generally wanted to help moms like myself, but I think I was still a little scared. I think I still was like, oh my gosh, like their problems are so big. How am I going to help them? And I think maybe, as a young coach, I was like, I have to fix them. Or fix the situation. But as I've actually really fully become a coach, I recognize that's actually not my job at all. Like I said earlier in our conversation, it's holding space for people. And it's recognizing that the reason that we're having the experiences that we are is not because of the circumstances, right? It's not because our child has these needs that we feel hopeless or lost. It's actually it's our relationship to that. In which it sounds so simple, like, well, that doesn't really matter, but it matters all the way, because that's actually, we can't change our circumstances. Like, we have no ability to do that, but we can change our relationship to how we're thinking about them, what we're making it mean, the way that we feel powerless over it. That's where we have an ability to change. So in my practice, I work with several different types of people, but the people that I'm most excited about working with is moms that have children with special needs. And I define that as any need. So medical, social, emotional, really any need that has a mom kind of questioning what's available to her. And the way that life coaching works is how we do one thing in life, like how we show up at home or in any relationship, is how we show up everywhere. So what I love so much about it is that when a woman takes on kind of owning who she is, it doesn't just impact her relationship with her kids or home. It overflows at work. And she actually is able to experience herself in a new way that's always been there. It's always who she's been. But just because we all have our own journey, that we don't always have the ability to access that parts of ourselves.
I love that. And I'll tell you, I remember I was in law school, and I remember when I had that epiphany, because I was a teacher. I was a kindergarten German teacher before I went to law school. And I remember the first answer that I gave in law school, I tried to like lean up on my hand and answer in this deep voice, like, the res ipsa loquitur, like I was like going to be a new person because I was in law school, right?
Oh yeah, but unfortunately you brought the same person with you to law school.
Yeah. I still have a really big smile, and I'm super silly. And Jimmy Buffett is a spiritual leader of mine, as we established before. Like, I'm still silly, right? And it's that Mary Oliver quote, I can be a great many things. Mm-hmm. And I'm all of those things every place I go. I love that.
Yeah, and so here's what's interesting. So I mentioned earlier, I wanted to start out helping moms, and then I didn't kind of dive into that, and so my practice ended up being a cross section of a lot of people. And even now, actually, I work with people inside of cross section of organizations, and we apply the work that I do to their professional life initially, but it always migrates back to what's going on for them personally. Because usually for people, that's what matters most to them. They're like, they definitely want to figure out how to advance at work, but what they really care is about that relationship with their wife or their husband. And so I think what I saw is like, I'm helping these people with these people are getting to access a coach and have this support in their life. What would it be like if moms had that access? Like if moms, whether they work outside the home or whether they're staying home and like working in their home as mom, what would it be like if they got that level of support for themselves? Like if they were able to actually have, so I coach one-on-one with people. So that what that looks like is once a week we meet and we really look at something specific and we get really specific. Like, hey, like, what do you want to create in your life? Like in terms of experience or actual goal. And so we work on moving that stuff forward and we look at what's in the way. And, can you just imagine like what it would be like if moms gave that to themselves?
Yeah.
Like not just that hour a week, but like everything that comes with it of like them actually tending to their own need like that, their own desire.
That sets you on the path, right? Like that sets you on that daily mission or that minute by minute mission. I mean, sometimes, we try to seize the entire day, but that's too much. So if we can just seize like the next 10 seconds, but if we do it with intent and we do it with that goal in mind, you can help to develop that framework, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's like when you put that little bit of intention in there, you can move it's like a little bit of intention goes a long way, right? So when you go from completely unaware, just kind of going like along with the flow of your life and going with the ups and the downs, like we talked about earlier, you just kind of go along. But when you put a little intention in, when you like intentionally seek out 1% more self-compassion or 1% more joy, then again, it ripples out and it actually, it makes a huge difference. It's not complicated. It just takes a little bit of intention and willingness to invest in yourself. And even getting to that place is sometimes a hurdle for people.
Well, that was actually the last question I wanted to ask you about it. And that is, I want to do a whole episode on compassion fatigue. Because I think there's a lot to dive into with that. But, both of us have a lot of friends and people that listen that are caring for people with disabilities and medical needs. And so I'm wondering if you can provide some guidance or some ideas about ways that you can be compassionate to yourself. You can provide yourself that little bit of respite, that little bit of tap in back to me. Like, I think about myself and I oftentimes say, I just want to be a girl. First of all, I live with 3 boys, so I literally just want to be a girl and like paint my fingernails. But
I live with 4 boys.
Right. But, sometimes I don't want to have to worry about everybody else. I don't want to have to worry about the doctor and the fever of the day and that kind of thing. I just want to be Ashley, that little girl again. And maybe it goes back to little, right? Like that little girl, maybe that's what it is. But yeah. So can you talk to us about what strategies or steps or methodologies people can use to kind of tap back into themselves occasionally?
Definitely. Well, it all starts with awareness. So it's always going to start with awareness because we can't change something we're not aware of, right? So if you actually have no concept of something, you're probably going to have a hard time addressing it. So there's a lot of different tools that we can use for awareness. Sometimes it's having like a visual representation, like having a client wear a ring or a bracelet or something like that, just so that that maybe if they're working on something like self-compassion and trying to like attend to their own need, that it's just something that it has to be something you're not used to wearing. Otherwise you won't notice it, but something that kind of has you just be present to, asking yourself, I'm working on compassion, like just literally doing a check-in. So that can be an effective awareness tool. Probably my favorite awareness tool is writing. And whether it's like quick, like writing on your phone when you're like waiting in a doctor's appointment, and checking in at that point. My favorite is doing something in the morning when it's quiet, and just allowing yourself to kind of just be exactly how you are, not trying to clean it up, not trying to fix anything, just being exactly how you are and letting that be okay. So I think even that to me is an act of compassion. It's an act of being kind to yourself and giving yourself what you need. So like I said, it starts with awareness. There's a lot of different ways that we can actually go about that awareness. And then I say from there, like, actually, I had a guest on a couple episodes again, and I love the way she explained it. It was like adding 1% more kindness to yourself. So, and that can come in a lot of different forms. It can be like, Ashley, what do you need right now? You know, asking yourself, right? And for you, it might be like, I want to just go shut myself in my room and like paint my nails, or I want to just go on a quick walk. And I think it's giving yourself permission to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting, and even like I find you mentioned the word compassion fatigue, and while I believe that the gift of social media is huge, there's so many good things that come out of that, but I think sometimes recognizing that we don't have to hold everything, right? So we don't have to read every story of every child that we come in contact with. And sometimes giving yourself the permission to say, you know, I'm going to focus on my immediate world right now and not feeling like a horrible person. That, I don't know, that just came up to me for me, because I think sometimes it's hard for us to balance what we're taking in and not recognizing the actual emotional load that all of that input has on us.
That is huge. That is so, I love the awareness thing, but what you just said there about not having to take on everybody's load, I oftentimes say to my family when we are in stressful times, okay, so we have to think about the four of us. And if the four of us are okay, we are okay. And that's all we have to do. And
I think changing the narrative, and because I feel like it's so easy to be like, oh, I don't know, like you should probably be giving to other people, or other people are giving to other people, or like I think that comparison thing, I think it's so easy to have a different narrative. And I think just giving yourself permission to do what you can do and not have to do more.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this was so great. I loved this. I'm so happy
too. I know. I think we're going to have to do more episodes. I did not want this time to end. This was just so, I don't know. For me, it's like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm getting to hang out with a new friend at a coffee shop, and like a friend that like I didn't know, but she's like secretly my best friend. So thank you so much for that time. And I would love for people to connect to the resources that you talked about. And so can you tell us briefly how to connect with you?
Yes, thank you. And I felt the same way. So I'm so grateful that we were connected. The website is www.ashleybarlowco, like company, C-O, ashleybarlowco.com. You can listen to the podcast any place where you like to listen to podcasts. It's also available as a vlog on YouTube. And then if you want to register for the course, they load occasionally, about quarterly. So you can just sign up for the mailing list when you go to the website.
Okay, perfect. And then for anybody that's driving or doing dishes right now with wet hands, we will put that all in the show notes so that's easily accessible and just a click away so that you can connect with Ashley. Because I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of moms that are going to say, sign me up for that course. I want to like be part of the energy that you're bringing to the IEP. Because I know for myself, I'm like, oh, like, it's like, I want it to be a little bit fun. I want it to be like not just all the black and white paper. I want it to have pretty colors and stuff like that. And for those of you that are new to Ashley, like she definitely brings that into everything that she's doing. So if you don't want it to be dry and boring, she's your girl.
Yeah. You can cartwheel on your way in and cartwheel on your way out. If you
that sounds like a plan. I like that.
Yeah, and different colored Sharpies for sure.
It's the little things. I'm telling you, it's the little things.
take them some bagels. I'm the girl that takes them cookies. So yeah, for sure. So, and to that extent, I put out lots and lots of free content on social media too. So I've got IGTV, little videos of the parts of the IEP and that kind of thing. So if people, if your listeners like Instagram, I do put a fair amount of content on there that's free, easy to access when you're sitting at the doctor's appointment, waiting on carpool, that kind of thing too. But I am happy to be this resource, and I am so happy to meet you and to meet your listeners too.
Well, likewise, it's been a pleasure. And for everybody, thank you so much for joining us. I am so glad that we all had this time together. And I feel like this episode is going to be like we're all just hanging out. It was kind of all over the place, but I think in a really good way. So we'll see you next time. So there you have it. I think I could have continued talking to Ashley for another 2 hours. We talked about a lot of things. In this episode, we talked a little about coaching, and I shared a little bit more about how I specifically help women. And I want to invite you to reach out to me. I want to invite you to a conversation, if you're at all interested, in exploring what it looks like for you to ask yourself for more, to not just settle for barely surviving, and explore the possibility of what it would be like to nurture yourself in the way of actually having a coach. And you can reach out to me on my website. There's a contact form, and easily on Instagram. I look so forward to hearing from you. And with that, we're going to wrap until next week. Thank you so much for joining. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.